Hello, everyone. Welcome. We'll give it a few minutes for everyone to join this presentation. Hello, everyone. Just give us a few more moments. We're waiting for everyone to join us. Welcome, everyone. Just give us a few more moments for everyone to join us. Hello, folks. We'll get started in just a moment. Give us a few more minutes. They'll be here in just a moment. Everyone's joining the presentation. Give us just a few more moments. We'll get started. Give us just a few more moments. We'll get started in just a moment. Okay, it looks like we have everyone here. Welcome, everyone, to our presentation today. Appreciate you joining us. Just a little reminder as far as what we're going to be offering in the near future. We're going to be offering an underwriting seminar here in Dallas, Texas. If you're interested in joining, our seats are limited. It's going to be the November 6th through November 8th. So if you're interested, feel free to send an email to info.us@optimumre.com, and we'll see if we have availability for you. In addition, we have a claims webinar coming up next year, actually two of them, one in February on beneficiaries and another one in May on suicides. So look out for those announcements. We're planning a full agenda for 2023. I'm Melanie Netzer. I'm going to be moderating this presentation today. If you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to chat to me on the Q&A chat, and we'll do our best to try to address them during the presentation. If we run out of time, feel free to send your questions in to info.us@optimumre.com, and we'll do our best to reply. Also, we remind you, we want to make sure that we're offering the types of topics that you're interested in. If you can please complete the survey after the presentation, we would really appreciate it. Now, I'll turn it over to Monica Clink. Monica Clink has been in the insurance industry for over 26 years with experience in life, disability income, critical illness, annuity, and hospital indemnity claims. She is currently the Vice President of Claims at Optimum Life Reinsurance in Dallas, Texas. Monica is actively involved with the International Claim Association and is currently the Secretary of the ICA, serves on its Reinsurance Committee, and also chairs its Education Committee. She is originally from New York and holds an MA in Economics from Syracuse University. Thank you, Monica. I turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Melanie. I appreciate that. Well, welcome, everybody. Today's topic is Buckle Up, Buttercup. Let's take a ride on the Contestable Claims Coaster. I am a fan of theme parks, so here we go. So here's our agenda. We're going to start at the station or the loading platform of a roller coaster. We're going to go through what is life insurance contestability. We're going to look at material misrepresentation, see how the misstatement of age or sex clause plays into contestability, look at the suicide exclusion just for a moment. Then it's uphill. So our uphill challenges, the actual language of the incontestable clause. We're going to look at reinstatements within 2 years of death. The contestable investigation is always a good topic of conversation. Then here we go. We're going to talk about adjudicating a contestable claim. What are we looking for? And then just dive right into the case studies, because we really know people like to look at those case studies. Double check those seatbelts. There's other things we have to look at. Always have some twists and turns with a roller coaster. But but then we always get back to the station. What a ride. And then of course, Q&A. So here we go. So what is life insurance contestability? Here's a picture of a loading platform for a roller coaster. It's the limited time frame, usually 2 years. We have seen 3 years, but it's usually 2 years, during which an insurer can rescind or contest coverage on the grounds of material misrepresentation. So what is material misrepresentation? There's a 3-part test. First, there's an incorrect answer to a question on the application. And it's just not any old question, any old issue that's not admitted to on the application. The insurer has to rely on that information at underwriting time. And it also has to be material. The material test is, would the application would it have been declined, or would the policy been issued other than applied for had the true information been known? So it's a 3-part test. So for instance, somebody didn't mention they fractured their wrist. Okay. So there's a question, have you seen a doctor in the last 5 years? And the person fractured their wrist in the last 2 years. It's a misrep. It's not material, because a fracture of a wrist would not have affected the issuing of that contract. Wouldn't have been declined, wouldn't have been rated. It's not material misrepresentation. But how about smoking? Let's go through the test here. Is it misrep? If someone was noted to be a non-smoker on the application and in the medical records noted to be a smoker, we have to see if there's a question on the application. Sometimes there's not, right? Sometimes it's an aggregate type of policy, so there is no question on smoking. But if there is a question, was it answered no? Okay, the person was really a smoker. Did the insurer rely on that information? Well, sure they did. Sure, if you can issue that contract as a smoker and non-smoker, then they rely on that question. And was it material? Absolutely, right? We all know that for a smoker rating, it's the insurer, the owner is going to pay more premiums. So smoking is considered material. And we do consider that material misrepresentation if the person noted to be a non-smoker and in the medical records learned at claim time, they are a smoker. Besides smoking, there's other types of material misrepresentation. Of course, there's medical history. It could be cancer, a stroke, whatever. Smoking status. They are actually a smoker and they noted to be a non-smoker, as we just mentioned, to get a cheaper premium. How about participation in hazardous activities? Absolutely. I mean, a person could have been, a cave diver. And if there was a question about scuba diving and they answered no, that could be material misrepresentation. Work status, person is not working and they noted to be, a CFO of a company. Absolutely, material misrep. Income, seen that quite a bit actually in larger policies. I've seen income misrep. One notable one was, very, very large policy, and income was noted to be like in the millions of dollars, and come to find out the CPA documents were fraudulent and the person did not make that kind of money. So it is very important to review that information if that is material to the policy. Drug use, of course, if there are questions relating to drug use on the application, felonious activity, you might have to run some criminal record history at the time of claim. Other insurance in force, sure. What if the person doesn't reveal that there's, $65 million in force and they're applying for 20 million? Well, that's a jumbo issue. Check the questions on that application. An and versus an or could make all the difference. A comma could make a difference. We have to check those questions word for word, comma, semicolon, whatever. We have to look at those questions to make sure that that question is appropriate if we are going to assert material misrepresentation. Okay, so how does the incontestability contestability clause reads. I've got a couple examples. We're going to go through them, and we're basically going to go from good, better, and best. So here's the good one. This policy shall be incontestable, so not disputable, except for non-payment of premiums, lapse, after it has been enforced for 2 years from the issue date or the date of the last reinstatement. Okay, that's very simple. Policy is not going to be contestable after it's been enforced for 2 years from the date of issue. So January 1st, 2020 was the issue date. Come January 1st of 2022, it's not contestable. Just from the issue date, just clearly from the issue date. Okay, so this is it's a good example. It's not 100% protection for the insurance company. Look at this little girl in a roller coaster. She's getting a seatbelt put over her. The seat is not appropriate for her. I could fit in that seat with her. And if I sat in that seat, I've got that whole seatbelt to go over me. And then she's just, doing one of these on the roller coaster. She's not safe. I'm safe. She's not safe. That's not appropriate for both of us. Right. So this will be protection, but not really good protection. This type of clause. All right. So let's see what a better type of clause would be. This policy shall be incontestable, except for non-payment of premiums, lapse, after it has been in force during the lifetime of the insured for 2 years from the issue date or the date of the last reinstatement. You can see how that's better. The insured has to be alive for 2 years for the policy to be incontestable. Okay, it's very different from the other one where it didn't have during the lifetime of the insured. Okay, so if this claim was reported duration 4 and the person died in year 1, the claim is still contestable because the insured did not live for 2 years. Very different. So what kind of protection? Better. So in this case, in this little picture of the roller coaster, each of those 2 people in the front have their own seatbelt. Okay, the little girl has a seatbelt, the gentleman has a seatbelt, and they have a little bar in front of them for their hands. So a little bit more protection. During the lifetime of the insured, it's a little bit more protection. But I have the best one for you coming up here. After this policy has been enforced during the insured's lifetime for 2 years after the policy date, we cannot contest this policy except for the non-payment of premiums unless fraud is involved. Okay, this one is flipped, but it still reads the same. I'll read it in the same order as the other 2. We cannot contest this policy except for the non-payment of premiums after this policy has been enforced through the insured's lifetime for 2 years after the policy date, unless fraud is involved. Okay, so in this case, the insured has to live for 2 years, but the insurance company has another protection unless fraud is involved. So that is now included in this one. And the fraud is not claim fraud. It's fraud at the time of application, unless fraud is involved. If a fraudulent claim is submitted, that's totally different. This is fraud at application time. So what kind of protection is this? This is like the 5-point harness type of protection. 5-point harness is the shoulder, shoulder, hip, hip, under the legs, right? So this is the best type of protection you can have for the incontestability clause.
Hey, Monica?
Yes.
We have a question.
Yes.
Is there significant protective value in adding amendments to be signed at policy delivery? Are some amendments stronger than others when tested in court? For example, amending financial information versus avocations versus amending medical information. Can we amend something from an APS that the client didn't declare? He signs the amendment, but then later it could be argued that he didn't understand it anyway, perhaps. Are we amending too many things that aren't really protecting us anyway?
Wow. That's a hefty question right there. I, of course, would prefer to have amendments signed, right? At underwriting time, really can't change the information that's submitted, right? If there's a correction to be made, it should be an amendment so that there is a meeting of the minds on both parties, what the understanding is, okay? That being said, I'd say probably in the last 10 years, I don't think I've had a claim which we had to rely on information on an amendment. Maybe I'm not seeing amendments very much anymore, but it does protect us at claim time if the amendments are signed. And it is a meeting of the minds so that we all understand what is revealed at underwriting time. I would still pursue amendments. Yeah. Any other question at this time?
No, thank
Okay.
you.
Okay, all right. So let's just recap the clauses here. So the first one with a one seat belt, not fitting for everybody. One seat belt doesn't fit everybody. So that is just 2 years from the date of issue. The next one, a little bit more protection. It's during the insured's lifetime. The person has to live 2 years and then it's incontestable. And then when we add the fraud clause, that's the 5-part harness. That is the most protection. I do want to make a little caveat here that I have switched up issue date and policy date within this language. I am quoting actual clauses that I see. So some of our clients use issue date, some use policy date, some use effective date. I can tell you I've never seen application date, but all the other dates can be used. So I wasn't trying to trick anybody up. I'm just quoting right from our clauses that we see, and our clients use them differently.
Hey, Monica.
Yes.
There was a follow-up from that last
Sure.
question. I'm sorry.
Sure.
It says, what about a statement of good health signed at time of delivery?
Oh, you know what? Further on in the presentation, I do have some good health issues. And I think let's hold off on that type of question until we get to those. I think I have 1 or 2 case studies with good health. Okay, and
Wonderful.
they can be important. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, on to just a second, we're going to talk about misstatement of age or sex. Those clauses read, if the age or sex of the insured has been misstated, any benefits under the policy will be those that the premium would have purchased at the correct age or sex. So once the death certificate is received and maybe there's a different date of birth on there, and then there's other proof of the correct date of birth, driver's license, passport, whatever, then the benefit will be adjusted appropriately. It's totally independent of the incontestability clause. That can happen at any time. And just a second on the suicide exclusion. This is actually coming from one policy, but 2 bullets for the suicide exclusion, which I thought was very unique because we generally don't see them quite like this. It reads, if the insured, sane or insane, dies by suicide while this policy is in force and within 2 years from the effective date, remember, companies use effective date, policy date, they use them interchangeably, differently, in the exclusions here in the clauses. The policy proceeds will be limited to the sum of premiums paid. That's generally what we see, right? If the manner of death is suicide, then the benefit is the premiums that have been paid. This client goes on to put another bullet for suicide, stating that if the insured, sane or insane, dies by suicide while the policy is in force, and within 2 years after the date a reinstatement becomes effective, very rarely see that. The policy proceeds payable will be limited to the sum of premiums paid since the reinstatement. Generally, we've seen that a reinstatement does not renew the suicide exclusion. But this was very, very interesting that we've seen this in a policy. So just one more. Yes.
Another question. I'm so sorry to interrupt.
That's all right. That's all right.
Again, trailing on some of the previous questions. What about a medical questionnaire signed following a modifications of the policy?
What does that mean? I don't understand. After modification of the policy. Like a rating, I'm just not understanding, excuse me, what that means.
Okay, we'll wait for clarification then.
Okay. In the meantime, I'm just going to finish up suicide because there's just one slide, I believe, on suicide. So suicide exclusion is independent of the incontestability clause. If the benefit is paid for suicide due to the manner of death being suicide within the first 2 years, the validity of the policy is not being contested. The policy is validated with the benefit being paid. If the premium refund is due to a material misrepresentation, but the validity of the policy is contested, the policy is void ab initio, void from the beginning, and the premium is refunded. So the check looks the same, but it's a totally different defense. The defense of the policy is not valid versus the person died by suicide. So very different. So Melanie, did we have the follow-up to that question, the clarification?
No, but we do have another question. I'm
Okay,
glad you
sure,
asked.
sure.
Who do you refund the premiums to, the beneficiary or estate of the owner?
We've seen it both ways. We've seen it to the owner, like it might not be like another person could own the policy, right? Like I could own my husband's policy. So the money could go back to the owner or it could go to the beneficiary. We've seen it both ways. I really haven't seen any issues from that, like someone else claiming, hey, I should have received the refund. I think it should go back to the owner myself. I mean, especially if it's if there is another named owner of the policy, it should go back to the owner. That's my opinion. It's not very clear though in the policy language.
I think we have a follow-up. I believe this is to that previous question. The question was, what about a medical questionnaire signed following modifications of the policy? The follow-up, I believe, is increasing of the insured capital. For example, the initial contract equals 200,000. After 3 years, they request to increase the insured capital of another 100,000.
Okay, so you've had an increase in coverage. Is that what we're saying, an increase in coverage?
That or possibly the financials?
I think we might have to address this outside of this webinar because I think it's more of a dialogue. So whoever is asking that question, as Melanie said, you could contact us through the webinar, through that email address, or you can contact me directly and we can have a chat about it. I think it's more of a dialogue.
Thank you.
So I appreciate that question. Okay, so here we go. We've got this lift hill, right? The first part of a usual roller coaster is that big lift before you take off. So here are the challenges that we're faced with. The incontestability language, as we just mentioned, we had the good, better, and best. Here's an example. We have a policy issued in 2019. The person dies in 2020. And the insurance company is notified over 2 years after the date of death. The contestability language is limited to 2 years, but is it contestable? It depends on the language of that incontestability clause, right? If it has during the insured's lifetime, it is contestable because the person didn't live for 2 years. If it doesn't have that during the insured's lifetime language, wouldn't be contestable. It's just like a live rescission. It's just 2 years, cut and dry, 2 years. But during the insured's lifetime, it protects the insurance company from cases like this where there's a late reported claim.
Hey, Monica, there's another question.
Sure.
Can you decline the full benefit for both misrepresentation and suicide in the same letter? This way, if the cause of death is changed or dispute the medical misrep, they are both covered for the return of premium.
So technically, if there's a manner of suicide, there's a benefit, right? The benefit is the refund of premium, but it's a benefit. It is a stronger case to rescind because then you're saying the policy doesn't exist, right? And the claimant would then have to refute the information that, oh, there's material misrep or whatever, intent to deceive. They've got to come back and say, wait a minute, you have this information incorrect. If you're saying the manner is suicide, right, you're saying the policy exists. And it's not an issue of contestability. You may have waived your rights already. We have seen carriers do this, but it's sort of like, okay, we rescind. And then, oh, by the way, we did notice that the manner of death was suicide. So even if there wasn't misrepresentation, the benefit would have been, or the amount of payable would have been the refund of premium. You can't really say it's a denied claim for suicide because there's a benefit. There is a benefit. The rescission would come first. And then you could back it up. Oh, by the way, you know, due to the manner of death, it would still have been a refund of premium of whatever, $500. So we have seen carriers note them both. I don't think I've ever seen anything come back into litigation, you know, when things are written, a denial letter is written like that, where they're mentioned both rescission and suicide. But it just has to be, you have to be very careful with your words.
Another question, can you deny with reservation of rights on suicide?
Yeah, so I do actually have within, I don't know, a couple slides, maybe, I don't know, 20 slides more. I do have examples of reservation of rights. And we would recommend to have reservation of rights in a claim that is paid due to the manner of suicide. Because some carriers will not do a contestable investigation when they see the manner of death is suicide. We would prefer that carriers do contestable investigations when the manner is suicide, because as I just mentioned, if there's misrepresentation, it's a stronger case to rescind and saying there's no contract. So we would certainly recommend contestable investigation. If for some reason they don't, we then say, hey, we would really recommend a reservation of rights because you don't have all the medical information. And what if more information is known and then received later on? It still might end up with the same check amount, right? So I have an example of reservation of rights further on in the presentation.
Another question, companies tend to save age and may backdate a policy up to 12 months. What is the best approach to cover 2-year suicide and contestability periods? Have you seen claims under these circumstances?
No, I have not seen a claim under those circumstances, but remember when I just said policy date, effective date, those type of dates, you got to be very careful of effective date, issue date, policy date, what date is noted. But for save age, no, I haven't seen anything. The most unusual timing of a suicide that I've seen recently was one day after the expiration of the 2-year duration. Like the person must have known that the benefit would have been available. But I haven't seen from, I haven't seen anything unusual when they're saving age. But again, we'd have to go with what the language says, what the clause says. Is it the effective date? Is the policy date, issue date?
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, that should do it.
Okay. All righty. So we're still going uphill. We have a reinstatement within the 2 years of death. So this is an ETI example, extended term. Policy benefit was $100,000 and it was issued in 2008. It did lapse with ETI value in 2021 and then was reinstated 3 months later in 2021. And the person died in 2022. So I think we can all say that the policy itself that was issued in 2008 is not contestable. All right, it's beyond the 2 years. Okay, how about the reinstatement? it was reinstated in 2021, and the person died within 2 years. Is the reinstatement contestable? Let's take a look. We have to know the expiry date of the ETI. So we've got value, but when does it expire? So I have 2 dates here. November 15th of 2025. If the ETI value is beyond the date of death, you can't ding someone for reinstating, and it wouldn't be, that value has to be paid. ETI value would had to have been paid, all right? Because you can't say, oh, wait a minute, you reinstated, there's nothing there. If the ETI value would have expired prior to death, is in the February 6th, then it would be. You also have to look at benefits that are reinstated. So when a policy goes into ETI, the benefits fall off. So if there's waiver, ADB, whatever, they fall off. And was there proof of insurability? In this case, there might not have been proof of insurability depending on the carrier. If there was maybe 3 or 4 years still left with ETI value, they might not get proof of insurability. We'd have to look at all of those items when we're looking at a claim like this to determine if it truly is contestable. That
Monica?
definitely, yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's all right. That's all right.
What does ETI mean?
Extended term insurance. So the policy was $100,000 and the policy lapsed. It did have value, right? It had cash value. So what it does, underneath, it takes the cash value and it purchases term insurance through whatever, up until whatever, I don't know, 90, 95, 100. It's extended term. It's the amount of the insurance, same amount with an expiry date. So you have $100,000. We're going to take the cash value. We're still going to have $100,000, but how long does it last? Does it last 2 months? Does it last 5 years? Does it last 10 years? So it takes the cash value, purchases it, but for a time period, a set time period that's going to expire. And in this case, I gave 2 different dates. It could have expired 4 years after it. It could have expired 4 years after it lapsed, or it could have expired just like next year. Okay, so it has an expiry date. No more premiums would have to be paid. Okay. So in this case, as I mentioned, if the expiry date of the ETI was 3 or 4 years down the road, carrier might not get proof of insurability because they would still have to pay it, right? You can't ding somebody for reinstating. It would have still been valid because it had an expiration date and it would have expired well beyond someone passed away. On the other hand, we have reduced paid up. So same kind of situation, $100,000 lapsed, it had value, but with reduced paid up, it takes the $100,000, it uses the cash value, reduces it, but pays it up until, I don't know, age 100. So I did misspeak on the ETI when I said it pays up to 100. On RPU, it does, but it's not $100,000. It could be $850. It could be, $10,000. It could be $30,000, whatever. But it's paid up. Again, no premiums would have to be paid. In this case, it lapsed with value. It was reinstated. The person dies within 2 years. We can still say the policy is not contestable. It was issued in 2008. But how about the reinstatement? Well, the reinstatement is contestable. Right? The death benefit is no longer going to be $100,000. It's going to be a smaller amount because it's paid up. So how much is contestable? We'd have to know the RPU amount. As I said, it could be $800, it could be $10,000, $30,000, whatever. Okay. If it is reinstated, it's the difference that's contestable. Because again, you can't ding somebody for reinstating. That RPU value is there. If it was $10,000 in RPU value, you got to pay that. And if it was reinstated to 100, it's the difference that's now contestable. You also have to look at benefits that have been reinstated. and if there was proof of insurability. In this case, there should be, because it's going to be that difference that's contestable. Okay, so on contestable investigations, still it's an uphill challenge to get that HIPAA authorization. You could have an authorization that is specific to the provider. You could have a friend is the beneficiary, but you need the next of kin to sign the HIPAA authorization. You might need letters of administration. It's really a struggle sometimes with the authorizations. Of course, medical records have to be obtained during a contestable investigation. That's a challenge. Providers will say, oh, we're backlogged, we're short-handed. Of course, we need different authorization. Sometimes you'll need a police report, autopsy, and toxicology. So these contestable investigations can take a while, months, right? It could take months. All right, so let's take a breather here. Just a fun fact. Okay, the first hill of a roller coaster is always the highest point, always the highest. So we've been going uphill this whole time in our presentation. From now on, the friction and the drag begins robbing the car of energy, and the maximum height of the hills and the car can climb, get smaller and smaller. So in this picture, you can see that on the left-hand side, that's the highest it could ever get. And then all the other hills just keep getting smaller and smaller until it finally comes to rest. So for all you physics fans out there, this is a great example of friction and drag. So for claims, might not be. Sometimes our hills get higher and higher as the claim goes on, or if it's denied, or if there's litigation. So for claims, not so much. Okay, so
Hey,
here we
Monica?
go. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's fine.
A question came in. Will we use the HIPAA that is part of the policy application to get info if we don't get a family member to sign? Of course, not everyone accepts it.
Yeah, we have not had luck. When I was on the direct side, we didn't have much luck because the person's already passed, if it's a life claim, right? So if the person has already passed away, is that valid? Probably not. Probably need the next of kin. I don't think we've had much luck trying to get that one to fly.
Thank you.
Yeah. So for a contestable claim, we're looking at the complete underwriting file, what was known, prescription history check, MIB, everything. We're looking at the whole underwriting file. During the investigation, we're going to get medical records. What's new? Was it material? We're looking at everything, all the medications, all the procedures, all the diagnoses, all that kind of stuff. Is it material? Financial records, as I mentioned earlier, financial records are very important if it's a large claim and it's the underwriting was determined based on financial records, financial position of the proposed insured. You might have to run a criminal history check. Agent knowledge, this comes up a lot, right? Oh, the beneficiary will come afterwards and say, but the agent knew that the insured had whatever, diabetes. Now that's hard. That's very difficult because now you have a he said, she said kind of thing. What did the agent know? 98.5% of the time, the agent's not going to say, oh yeah, I knew, because then what's going to happen to him or her? They're going to lose their job. So don't know if you're going to get a lot of valuable information from the agent because the agent has a vested interest in his own financial status by working. If he comes forward and says, I knew everything. State statutes are important. We're looking at causal states. So Missouri, Connecticut, Kansas, those are causal states. So to assert material misrep, you have to link the cause of death to the material misrepresentation. The most basic example is passenger in a car. A passenger in a car passes away. In a causal state, there's not much you can do. There's nothing really for misrepresentation other than, they were in a getaway car and there was, criminal history. I mean, that's like the nth degree there. But usually in a causal state, not much you can do there. Intent to deceive, that's an element of fraud. It's not just material misrepresentation. The insured had to know for sure. And just a little bit of that fraud has to be there with the intent to deceive. So sometimes that is a little bit tricky. The claim can be approved, the claim could be denied, and the policy rescinded. So two different things that can happen there, but there's a lot to consider. All right, so here we go. All right, we're into the case studies now. Okay, so here we go. Substitution. In my examples here, I've listed the issue dates and dates of death pretty similar. You'll see them basically they're the same. I will change them if they make a difference in the claim, but for the most part, I'm putting dates here that just note it's contestable. All right. So in this case, it's a contestable claim. Policy was issued in 2020. The person died in 2021. Pretty clear that it's a contestable claim. The cause of death was ALS and the state was Maryland. Underwriting file, all questions were answered no. It was an e-app, electronic app. Signatures are digital stamps. Personally, I'm not a fan of that. We'll see why. MIB, no hit, no prescriptions. Policy issued standard, 45 mail, $400,000. So pretty much clean sheeted. I mean, I'm not a fan, as I said, of the digital signatures, but you know, that's how policies are issued sometimes. Okay, so what do we have here? Some very interesting things happening around that issue date. So issue date, 11/15/2020. That is the date of the digital signature on the application. Interesting, though, that you have the time of those digital signatures, and it comes in handy because in this situation, we know that the insured presented at the hospital at 11 o'clock in the morning. The insured was unresponsive and was immediately intubated. So the tube down the throat. Couldn't talk. That was at 11. And signed, somehow, shouldn't say signed, there is a digital signature on the application at 7:45 that night while the person was still intubated. There is proof in the medical records that this person was intubated for more than a day on the date of issue. Excuse me. 2 days after that digital signature, the insured was diagnosed with ALS. And then a week later, there's a wet signature on the receipt of the policy. And there was also an indication on that receipt that there was no change of health. Okay. When clearly there was. So let's take a look at these dates. Person was intubated on 11/15, 11 o'clock in the morning. After dinner time, there's a digital signature on an application. That date has the issue date of 11/15, that date. 2 days later, diagnosed with ALS. Delivery receipt of 11/24, indicating good health, and died the next year. So what's the disposition of this? Okay, I think there's substitution here. I mean, if a person was intubated and unresponsive, they're not signing this application. What about the agent's knowledge? What did he know? That's important in a case like this. There is protection that it's an e-app. You know, he might have not known there was a substituted person applying for this coverage, or even signing the receipt. Who was that? Was it the insured? Probably not. Would he have known who it was? No. I mean, if it's an e-app, probably not. So agent knowledge, when it's an e-app, more protection, but still there's something not so savvy going on here. It wasn't an e-app. That agent has got to answer to what was happening here. And it might be that the agent knew nothing, right? Maybe. It could have been totally substitution that somebody stood and ink signed an application if it was not an e-app and it wasn't the insured. That has happened. Maybe the agent wasn't involved. Maybe he was. Maybe it's collusion. In cases like this, you need an agent questionnaire, maybe, you know, a dialogue with him, signed statement, whatever. We got to know, what did he know? Because knowledge of the agent is imputed to the principal. Next one is the business decision. So again, the dates are the same. This is lung cancer claim in California. Pretty much not so clean cheated. Okay, omeprazole for GERD. That's not an issue. $25,000 policy issued standard on a 48-year-old female. But other than that, no issues. She had diagnosed, she had her lung cancer diagnosed in May of 2020, half a year prior to that policy being issued. And she was treated with chemo. And chemo started, shortly after that. And the question was answered no. In the past 5 years, oh, I have a typo, past 5 years, have you been diagnosed or treated for cancer? That question was answered no. Was it material? Oh yeah. Yeah, I would say that's material, right? You wouldn't have issued that contract had you known this person was going through chemo that year. Disposition, with what we know here, I say that could be a decline. That would be a declined claim policy rescission. I'm not going to let you off that easy because this is a business decision, right? And the business decision is going to take it a little bit further because there was more to the story. The notice of claim came in May 30th. The receipt of the proofs from the claimant, so that would be the claim form and the death certificate, arrived 2 months later. The client, the seating company, sent no other correspondence to the beneficiary, didn't acknowledge it, didn't mention, hey, we're getting records from Kaiser Permanente, nothing. Okay, but they did get records, and they were received about 3 months later in October. And the claim examiner noted it was payable. Don't know why. Okay, because we saw that there was a diagnosis of cancer, but the claim examiner noted in the file that it was payable. Somehow this got lost. It fell through the cracks and an underwriter finally reviewed it, 4 months later. I said, whoa, wait a minute. There's material misrep. This was not a payable claim. There was obviously material misrep of cancer. Now, what do you do with that? Well, this is California. California has some strict statutes regarding fair claims. If you note the claim was payable and don't act on it, don't send things to the beneficiary, keeping them in the loop of what's going on, that could be considered bad faith. So in this case, the carrier made a business decision to pay the claim because they didn't want to face California or the risk of being faced with a lawsuit and then have all this stuff come up. So in some cases, even though there was clearly misrep, the claim would have been paid as a business decision to avoid any potential litigation. So that is a case of a business decision. Heartstrings. Here's another case study. Again, contestable. The cause of death is hemorrhage secondary to pregnancy. The underwriting file, pretty clean. All questions were answered no. MIB, no hit. Prescription history, there was none. It was issued standard, $300,000 for a 32-year-old female. So the contestable investigation revealed that the insured had cryptogenic cirrhosis since 2015. All right, portal vein thrombosis, status post the splenorenal shunt in 2017. And there's a question on the application that reads, in the past 7 years, has any proposed insured been diagnosed, treated for, or been given medical advice for cirrhosis or any other disease or disorder of the abdominal organs? There's a question, and it pertains to this insured. But of course, there's more to the story. All the records were received, including the terminal confinement. And this is why I say it's heartstrings. All right, this insured presented to the emergency department with severe pain. She lost consciousness, was pulseless, fixed pupils. They decided to do a perimortem C-section. So that is when someone is very close to death. They did a C-section. The baby survived. The insured never recovered. and the time of death was then called. So the insured had passed away, the baby was delivered, and what do you do? I mean, we know this now. We know that what happened. And I put this picture, that's basically this picture of this person on a roller coaster. It was like, what do we do? Like, it's like, this is such a sad case. What should you do? Remember, there was cirrhosis, but now you know that this happened. What's the disposition? Okay, we have to take the emotion out of it. We can feel for this person. We can feel for the family. We can feel that the husband is now left with bearing his wife, but yet has an infant. We know that has happened, but we have a contract that we have to enforce. And as hard as it is to deny a claim like this, we can't pick and choose what we want to pay and what we don't want to pay based on what the family is going through. Because if we do that to this family, why didn't we do it to the other family that we really didn't know about? We can't do that. An insurance company can't do that. Okay. My colleague, Michelle McAllister, will say we can't be arbitrary and capricious. And that is true. We can't pick and choose. So unfortunately, even though this really pulled at our heartstrings, this claim is not payable because they did not disclose they had cirrhosis since 2015. Now, some cases we have seen carriers do an extra contractual payment. It's not the claim that's paid, it's an extra contractual amount. The reinsurers don't get involved in that. But in this case, as hard as it is, it's a denied claim. Don't ask, don't tell. Well, let's recover from that one. That was a hard one. Okay, so this is a contestable claim, heart attack in Florida. All questions were answered no. It was a phone app, and the signatures are like on the recording of the phone app, and it was issued preferred, 25,000. So no other issues other than it was a phone app, but that happens. I mean, we do see phone apps, we see e-apps, nothing unusual there. So the contestable investigation revealed that the insured had a history of congestive heart failure in 2017, angioplasty the year before app to open the blocked coronary arteries. And the question on the application reads, in the past 5 years, have you had or been treated for coronary artery disease, myocardial infarction, congestive heart failure, or any other condition of the heart? So what do you think? Material misrep? I'd say so. I really do. You got congestive heart failure and angioplasty. There's a question. Disposition, I'd say that's not payable. But there's more, of course. It's not that easy. Twists and turns. The contestable investigation also revealed that the question wasn't answered on the application. So there was a question. It just wasn't answered. And there was also a phone interview, but that question wasn't asked at all. So in that case, don't ask, don't tell. Question wasn't noted to be yes or no. So there's no representation on that question. So there can't be misrepresentation. You can't deny that type of claim. It has to be paid. Don't ask, don't tell. So at underwriting time, that has to be underwriters have to be very careful that all the check boxes are there and they have those, the appropriate answers. We go on to an intent to deceive one. Okay, so this case is, again, contestable in Louisiana. The cause of death was prostate cancer. All questions were answered no. MIB, no hit. The prescriptions were insulin for diabetes and gabapentin for neuropathy. And it was issued standard. So the contestable investigation revealed that the insured actually had uncontrolled diabetes, diabetic neuropathy, diabetic nephropathy. And the question reads, in the last 5 years, have you had or been treated for uncontrolled diabetes, including any complications from such? So at underwriting time, you knew about diabetes, you knew about neuropathy. You didn't know nephropathy, but neuropathy. So what can you do with that? That's a tough one because you're in Louisiana. Louisiana is an intent to deceive state. So could they come back and say, hey, You knew about diabetes. You knew about neuropathy. You knew about them. Are you now stopped from asserting material misrep because you knew about it? Louisiana, I probably wouldn't go down that road because it's an intent to deceive. And if you knew the information, you knew it. And you could also say you're stopped from using that information. So what is estoppel? Estoppel is a legal principle that prevents or stops someone from asserting a fact that is contradictory to any already established truth. So you already knew about it. You can't do anything about it now. If you didn't do anything about it at underwriting time, now you can't take any adverse action. Okay, so that's estoppel. So in Louisiana, because it's an intent to deceive state, might be very hard pressed to assert any type of material misrep because you knew about it and you had the information. And even though it wasn't even though you didn't have uncontrolled, you knew that information.
Monica?
Yes,
I
ma'am.
have a question.
Sure.
Could you please confirm if can you please confirm if material misrepresentation is proven and a claim is declined? Do you refund the full premium?
For material misrep, yes. The full premium is refunded. If it's fraud, if there is true fraud, some states say you don't have to even refund the premium if it's fraud, but material misrep, you do. You have to take everybody back as if that policy never occurred. So reverse everything out. So premiums are reversed.
Thank you.
Okay, here's another reinstatement. Issue date was 2020 and it lapsed with ETI coverage. The ETI expired in 2025. I do note that it was a $50,000 policy with no riders at issue. So when it lapsed with coverage, it lapsed at $50,000. So no issue of any riders being reinstated. And the expiry date of the ETI was 2025. Okay, it was reinstated though. And the date of death was shortly afterwards in 2019. Cause of death was breast cancer, state of Wisconsin. So is it contestable? Well, look at the expiry date of the ETI, 2025. Remember I said a while ago, you can't ding somebody for reinstating. Would the ETI value been in force had it not been reinstated? Yes. $50,000 would have been available on the date of death, regardless of the reinstatement. So the only part that would have been contestable would have been the premiums from the reinstatement. And you got what, a couple months? It's really not worth it at that point. So this one will really not be, the face amount is not contestable.
Hey, Monica,
Yes.
another question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you pay interest on the refund of premium due to a rescission?
We've seen carriers do it both ways. Some pay interest and some don't. And to be honest with you, I don't know if one is better than the other. I don't think it's, I haven't seen statutes. There might be, I don't know. I do know that, refund a premium, you might have to pay interest in some states. I'm not sure.
Another question. What's the difference between fraud and misrepresentation?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so fraud is a much steeper test, right? There's an intent to deceive. There's going to be some kind of misrepresentation, right? They're going to have to lie, and they wanted to benefit from it. So intent to deceive and benefit from it. So sometimes you have to look at the owner versus, if the proposed insured was his own owner, or if there's another owner. It's a different type of test for fraud because you have to prove intent and for financial gain. So material misrep is like one piece of it, and then keep adding layers until you get fraud. And fraud is a much bigger test. And unfortunately, I don't have any. I don't know. I do have a fraud case coming up, I think, in this presentation. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. So hold on. We will see that one. Okay, so still with good health. Okay, so with this one, we already did this one, sorry. Oh, no, we didn't. Sorry, I got distracted. Okay, so here's a good health one, case study. Contestable, the person died of COVID. Another significant factor was lung cancer. All questions answered no. Got MIB was no prescription other than antibiotics, which is no big deal. Okay, so what did we know at underwriting or contestable investigation? We know that the app was signed on 11/15, issued the same day. 2 days later, 2 days, there was a referral for a CT due to headaches for months. So this insured had a history of headaches for months. Finally, after signing the application, has that referral for a CT scan. And 2 days later, that CT was taken and was read, and oh, the insured has a mass in the brain. And then 2 days after that, the policy is issued and mailed. Of course, the insurance company does not know this, right? Does not know that the person has a mass in the brain. Not in the application. You have to find it. It's above the signature. You could have the HIPAA authorization and all this stuff, but above maybe the HIPAA authorization, there could be this language that says no liability exists. Oop, typo. Sorry, for company ABC until the policy is delivered and accepted by the owner. The first full premium is paid, and there has been no change in health of the proposed insured that would have changed any of the answers in the application. So it has to be, premiums got to be paid, policies got to be delivered, all in the same state of health of the insured. So again, this person's health changed by delivery. There was a mass in the brain. That mass was actually the metastasis of the lung cancer. So disposition, there was a change of health. All right, that would have been denied. This clause, that good health statement within the application, it's in the application, it's not on delivery, it's in the application, is the reason to gather medical records dated until the time the policy is delivered and preferably until the date of death. Okay, it's very important to get that. In this case, that was key to see how that all played out after the policy was applied for. There was a change of health, and a very significant change of health. There's a bonus good health. Okay, so the policy was issued in 2015. It lapsed without value, so 0. So it reinstated back up to $50,000 in 2019, and then died 2 months later of breast cancer in Wisconsin. So is this contestable? Okay, it lapsed without value. So it went from 50,000 to 0, back to 50. 50,000 is now contestable, okay, because it lapsed without value. To review the original application, the reinstatement application. Okay, the original policy itself is not contestable. I get it, but we like to review that original application as well, because you can't ask stricter questions on the reinstatement than you did on the application, right? Some carriers use the same application, or the reinstatement questions are broader, but they can't be more specific. So we look at both just to make sure where we stand. And in this case, I just thought it was interesting that this was the reinstatement application language. I hereby represent that I and all persons insured under said policy are now in good health. Good health, what does that mean? I don't like that phrase of good health because it's very subjective. A person that has diabetes and on insulin could say that they're in good health. Good health to them, not to their doctor. Free from all disease. Very vague, again. Are of temperate habits. I'd have to question what that meant. Maybe that's not understandable by some people, that it's just of average habits. Some might not know what that meant, and have not been inmates of any hospital or institution. When you're talking about a hospital, just like, I don't know, Grady Hospital, or, I don't know, Baylor Hospital, you're inpatient. you're not inmates. You're inmates of a prison. So it's not very readable for a proposed insured when they're reinstating their application. So I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. It is a very broad statement. Good health. I do not like that phrase, good health. Also, I don't like when, are you now currently receiving? Are you currently receiving, home health care? What does that mean if I'm currently receiving? Is it today, yesterday, this month? So I don't like those really vague words. Okay. Oh, let's double check those seatbelts. Okay. So maybe we've denied a claim, and we've gone through some cases where we've denied a claim. What do? We're going to do a letter. We're going to do a premium refund. In that letter, we need to be specific but brief. We don't need a 4-page denial letter in most cases. Specific but brief. Include the questions that were answered incorrectly. That's very important. The beneficiary, the claimant, needs to know what questions were answered incorrectly. Sometimes you have to include the insurance department information in case they don't agree. It's up to the insurance company to tell them, here's the Illinois Department of Insurance, if you should have any dispute. So sometimes you have to include that in your denial letter. And here's where we go to the reservation of rights. So here's some typical language that we've seen that we kind of like for reservation of rights. Company ABC does not waive any rights or defenses and specifically reserves the right to conduct additional inquiries or assert different positions should the claim be reconsidered based upon new information. So we do see that in denial letters, rescission denial letters. We see that in the payments for suicide. For instance, with the suicide, as we mentioned, an hour ago, that suicide, if you're paying the premium refund, that's stating the policy is in force. And if you put this in there, that's better protection that you could assert another inquiry. You can get additional medical records if they should come back and dispute that. Be careful. Some denials cannot be unilateral. They have to be filed in the courts. So a letter to the claimant might not cut it in some states. So be careful of that. Okay, other twists and turns, kind of like this picture. That's my kind of roller coaster. So what other challenges could we have? We talked about agent knowledge. Acts of the agent are normally imputed to the principal. So what the agent knew at underwriting time, the principal knew. And it doesn't matter if anybody in the home office knew. Acts of the agent are imputed to the principal. So if the agent knew, you knew. You as the company knew. You, not as Monica, knew. And you could get into the he said, she said. Okay, my agent said I didn't have to worry about my diabetes. Well, you can't say that. He can't be waiving the company's rights. And it could be the agent said, I didn't know about this. I didn't know about the health history. And the beneficiary saying, oh, yes, he did. So you're going to have they're going to be meeting like that. They're going to be butting heads because one's going to say you knew, the other's saying I didn't know. And those can be very difficult. You could get a claimant disputing the materiality of the whole thing. For instance, when we went through that case of the diabetes and the gabapentin, was that material? Was uncontrolled diabetes material? If you already knew that they were on gabapentin. We'll see claims for breach of contract due to the manner of death. So for instance, California is not a causal state. And we might see a letter from an attorney stating, the insured died of COVID, but you're claiming a history of, we'll say pancreatic cancer. They're not related. You can't do that. Well, in California, you can. It's not Kansas. It's not a causal state. You can do that. So someone will claim breach of contract, and sometimes they'll go away once that distinction is made. So some will just come forward and say it has nothing to do with the manner of death, cause of death. Well, sometimes it doesn't have to be. There could be a dispute of intent, meaning, well, they didn't mean it. They didn't mean to say, they didn't mean to omit that this information was material. They didn't think it was material. There was an intent to do that. Now it gets tougher to defend that. Now You know, maybe talk to doctors, you know, how bad was the condition portrayed to the proposed insured? Was it, you know, it's no big deal? Or was it, oh yeah, you know, you really got to take your medication for X, Y, and Z condition, or, you know, it's fine, you know, you'll be fine. What kind of intent was there? There could be a dispute of the medical history noted in the medical records. We've seen that happen. The beneficiary will come forward and say, no, the proposed insured, the insured did not have that. They didn't have that. We will see that. It's not up to the beneficiary though. Sometimes the beneficiary does not know the health history of the insured. We already talked about claim of estoppel. They'll come forward, the beneficiary. Well, you already knew it. Well, if you already knew it, we know you can't take action. So we have to be careful about that. What we knew at underwriting time, you can't now use as a defense because you knew as a company. All right, so we have a case study for twists and turns. It's a contestable claim, California. Cause of death was ovarian cancer. Underwriting file, you know, all questions no. Signatures are digital. We already know that I don't like that kind of stuff, but it's going to happen. MIB no hit. Prescription was diazepam for situational anxiety. Okay. And it was issued standard, non-tobacco, 400,000, 56-year-old female. Okay, so here we go. What did we find out? It was issued non-tobacco, but now we see there's a history of smoking for 20 years and still noted to be smoking a month before issue. So we have the history. We make sure that, okay, do we see this history that can fit into a question on the application? Yeah, we still see this insured smoking. So there's a clear picture of smoking. It's not like the person stopped and restarted. There's also a history of emphysema since 2015. So is it material? Well, there's some questions on the application. You know, in the past 24 months, have you used any form of tobacco? And then in the past 5 years, have you had or been treated for any lung or breathing disorder, including emphysema? So 2 questions on the application that would apply to the situation where the person has a history of smoking and has emphysema. We're in California. We did a California one a couple of case studies ago where the client, the direct carrier didn't do proper follow-ups. In this case, all proper follow-ups were done. There was no delay in reviewing of documents. Everything was done properly. All the I's were dotted, T's were crossed. So what do you do with this? Say there's misrepresentation. Smoking, emphysema. There's misrepresentation. There's questions. Everything was done properly. But there's a twist and turn, right? There's twists and turns. Love this picture. This is, I believe it's the manta ray in SeaWorld in Orlando, and it dips down into the water. It's pretty cool. Anyway, I digress. Okay, so here's the twist and turn. The beneficiary claimed that the insured never smoked and did not have emphysema. Okay, what do you do with that? I mean, smoking history and emphysema were listed multiple times in the records. It wasn't just once. Once it might be an error, but it's listed continuously in the medical records. So the beneficiary said, see, here's the document from the provider. The medical records were wrong. The provider is now denying this history of smoking and emphysema. Okay, all right. Well, you can't take that lightly, right? Because now you have conflicting information. You have medical records saying one thing, and something else from the provider stating another. And as we know, like tie goes to the runner. Okay, but take it a step further. The direct carrier contacted the provider. The provider confirmed that there were errors. Well, they contacted the provider to confirm if the errors were accurate. Were there errors in the medical records? Okay, the provider denied any correction to the medical records. The provider said what's in the medical records that's accurate. This insured was a smoker, smoked for 20 years, and had emphysema. And furthermore, I did not make any correction. Didn't do it. I didn't send it. It's not my signature. That's nothing. So what happened? The beneficiary submitted a fraudulent document. That was a fraudulent document to get the claim paid. Truly fraud right there. There is an intent to deceive, right? Here's a fraudulent document. And it's an intent to deceive to get money. That's fraud. That is fraud. That's not material misrep. That's fraud right there.
Hey, Monica.
Yes, ma'am.
We have a question. Actually,
Sure.
two.
Okay.
Have you ever come across a case where the language of the policy was not specific or detailed, so the insured answered to the best of their knowledge and come to find out they lied on the state of their medical history? What would happen in this scenario?
Could you repeat that question?
Have you ever come across a case where the language of the policy was not specific or detailed, so the insured answered to the best of their knowledge and come to find out they lied on the state of their medical history? What would happen in this scenario?
Yeah, so it would be, I would say, a question on the application. I think those can be of real concern. And it could be, yeah, of their ability. If they're answering to their best ability, in some states, even that's not good enough. In some states, knowledge of how material something is doesn't matter. I mean, some states are that specific. But if it is a question on the application and it is ambiguous, you can't hold that against the proposed insured if it's ambiguous. I could probably find a case. Yeah, I'm probably sure I ran across something. And as I said, like currently, when I said currently, I mean, currently is up in the air. How far back do you go for a currently type of question? Do you currently receive home health care? I don't know how to defend that. I really don't. That is a question on the application. And as I said, tie goes with the runner. They would generally be paid. If there's any type of confusion about a question, you can't defend it.
Another question. When adjudicating a claim, obtaining medical records is a significant part of the investigation. Could you please talk about the various challenges you may have faced when various as hospital, family physician, doc consultant?
Kind of lost you there, Melanie. The question is to address challenges of getting medical records?
That's correct.
Okay, sure, many challenges. So first it would be the authorization, right? So sometimes you need a family member or you need the representative of the estate. We've had cases, sad to say, but it was the girlfriend who was the beneficiary. And the insured was married. So she's got to get the, wife's authorization. And you think the wife is going to authorize anything on a claim for the girlfriend to be the claimant? No, that's not going to happen. There can be a lot of family issues where you can't even get an authorization to begin with. Then you have the providers who have their own authorizations. How do you keep track of that? Sometimes you go to an outside investigator and they will have them at hand. They'll have Grady Hospital ready to go. They'll have Kaiser Permanente ready to go. They have all their authorizations. They know which ones to use and when. Letters of administration sometimes are required, and you might have small policies. So maybe the providers will accept, a small state affidavit instead of having a beneficiary go to the courts to get a document. For what? Just to get medical records. So those are challenges, as well as now, once you have the authorization, how do you get those medical records? As I said, providers going to say, we're shorthanded. We have a backlog. We're not going to get to it for 2 months. And here you've got a call from your beneficiary, your claimant, what about my claim? What about my claim? And you're stuck because the provider is not releasing the medical records. There's no easy way around it. I do know that there are third-party investigators that do the legwork, and at least it takes it off the desk of a claims adjudicator. Yeah, you have to pay for it, but at least you're not dealing with the providers and, getting the authorizations and sending them in and doing the follow-ups. And then some, they'll charge $1 a page. That's ridiculous. They'll really try to gouge the insurance companies for that. You're like, wait a minute. I don't need all the records. I need admission, discharge, pathologies. I don't need the nurse's notes. You try to then whittle it down if they're going to charge that kind of exorbitant amount.
Another question.
Mhm.
If there's a question on the application regarding illegal drug use and the applicant listed no, that they have not used any illegal drugs, but we discover in a review that they used marijuana or did at the time of application, what is your opinion or stance on marijuana used in states where it is legal? Do you consider this misrepresentation? Do you follow the federal guidelines that do not recognize marijuana as legal?
Well, okay, so first and foremost, what does your underwriting manual have, right? Because if you are challenged, you're going to have to find the information in your underwriting guidelines, your underwriting manual that was in effect on the date this person applied for the insurance and the policy and the application was underwritten. What did you have in front of you? What could you do? If was it okay to use marijuana? All right, we've had cases where we had to go back to our manual on a specific day. So not this version of the manual, not this one, not like go back years to find out what was valid. I might be hard pressed really to use marijuana as illegal, especially if it's legal in the state. Because now if you go to court, now what do you got to do? You know, I'm not an attorney and I don't play one on television and I do not like to go to court. You know, I've been deposed, don't want to do it again. You know, I really try to take a conservative approach in denials, try not to get into litigation. I want to, I have to protect our client's interests. So if I see something that might go sour, I might say, wait a minute, maybe you might want to consider payment on that. I might not go down the road to deny that.
Another question. Have you been presented with contestable claims that come through unclaimed property searches and you don't get any response from the beneficiary?
Yes. So we have seen those, and what the general practice, what we see clients do, they'll put the refund premium refund into unclaimed assets, and then finally to a sheet to the state. Can't do the full face amount if it's contestable. What is the minimum amount that would be paid? Premium refund. So at least that would be, unclaimed funds and eventually escheated. But we do see that, and that's what we see clients doing. Anything else, Melanie?
Nope, that's it. Thanks.
Okay. All righty. So we're back to the station here. We have gone through a whole roller coaster. We left the station, we went up hills, we've done twists and turns, and now we're back. Claim adjudication is not for the faint of heart. We've got these investigations. We just talked about investigations due to the question, right? Investigations are not easy. You've got authorizations to deal with, providers to deal with. You got a lot of information to get and to put into the file. You got to determine if there's a contestable claim at hand in the first place. It's RPU, ETI, all that stuff. Really difficult. Determining material misrep. There's that three-prong approach to determine it. And sometimes, you could have a discussion with an underwriter or another claims adjudicator, and you could have different interpretations of it. Claimants and beneficiaries, my heartstrings case. You feel for folks, which can't be arbitrary and capricious. You have to adjudicate claims according to the policy contract. And of course, litigation. And as I just mentioned, I don't like to be in litigation. Nobody does. And try to stay out as much as we can. So buckle up, double check for safety, check those harnesses, don't lean out the vehicle. Here's some of the resources that I use on a daily, if not weekly, or sometimes annual basis. The ICA, the ACLI. I go to industry meetings. I go to the ICA annual conference. We just held our annual conference in September. I go to the Eastern Claims Conference as well. Investigators, I mentioned there's third-party investigators that are very well versed in getting medical records or even doing foreign investigations. Academy of Life Underwriting, great exams that they offer to learn about underwriting and learning about medical conditions. And of course, your reinsurer. I left our LinkedIn link there. Your reinsurer, call your reinsurer, call me, call my staff. I mean, when I started in the industry way back in 20-some years ago, my manager said, if you have a question, contact your reinsurer. And that person I still see at the ICA annual education conference. I still know who he is and still hold conversations with him. So I've had this relationship with this person for 26 years or so. So contact us. We're there to help you. So claim adjudication might not be as smooth as this kind of roller coaster. This is a kiddie roller coaster, funny face. You don't see those twists and turns, but by golly, look at this thing. This is a real roller coaster. It might be more like this thing that has fire coming out at you. Okay. So any other questions? Any other questions? We got about 4 minutes left.
Yes, we have a few.
Okay.
Do you find that there are more contestable claims where the applicant has passed outside of the United States? Are there other tools that an insurance company can use to investigate these claims that a domestic claim would not need?
Yeah, so first it's a contestable foreign claim, right? So that is difficult. I mean, let alone a foreign claim is difficult. Now put in contestability, and you have to get medical records. And if the medical records aren't in English, I have to have them translated or find somebody that knows the language. So if I was on the direct side and I was approached with a claim like that, I would contact a third-party investigator, another investigator, like not employed by us, obviously. I mean, it's an investigator that's what they do. That's their job. They can have contractors, like say in Haiti, like they'll have contractors in Haiti and they'll go to the hospitals there and get medical records. Now you're not going to get medical records like you do here. Like if you get medical records from the VA here in the United States, I mean, if you saw it on someone's desk, you're going to have a stack. You might get a couple pages. It's going to be different in a foreign country. But investigators would do not only the contestable investigation, but the foreign investigation as well. And you have to do both. You have to do both. So it is more difficult, but I would just outsource it to an investigator.
Another question. Did you experience disagreements on claims with direct companies? In these circumstances, how do you work out the difference?
Yeah, so sometimes we do. Generally, we do like to talk about it first and foremost, because if there's a dispute of, say, a denied claim, we'd like to have the seating company's file as clean as possible. We don't want to put information that could be discoverable and that could hurt their case. We try to have discussions, and we try to get a meeting of the minds. We really do. We're true partners. We share in the risk. We review claims just like a seating company does, and we have the experience, many years, 20-some years of experience myself reviewing claims. I haven't seen it all. I'll never see all the type of claims, but I've been around the block. We want to make sure the file is clean in case of a rescission. So we try to call first and get a meeting of the minds. And there might be multiple discussions, but at the end of the day, we come to some agreement.
Another question. For claim adjudications where there is a history of cancer, then remission, but the cause of death is the same cancer that has come back, how do you handle?
Oh. Okay, well, I mean, that's a very broad question, right? So say if, as I said, it's a broad question. I mean, I'd have to know timelines. If a woman had been diagnosed with breast cancer and was taking tamoxifen, we don't say that's treatment for cancer. That's to prevent further occurrence of cancer. We don't say that is treatment for cancer, but we really have to look at the timelines and of course the state that's involved. But if we know that if we didn't know there's a history and now there is, there could be misrepresentation. You may have known history, like, I don't know, lymphoma as a young child or an adult, young adult, and then you get some other cancer later in life. Well, by now, by the age of 50, maybe they were a standard risk anyway. Now they get another type of cancer. Well, I mean, we just adjudicate that as we normally would. I would just have, that's more of a dialogue type of question. There's a lot of moving pieces to that type of question.
Okay, thank you. Well, it looks like we're running out of time. I appreciate everyone's questions. If there's anything that you would like for us to address, feel free to send it to info.us@optimumre.com or contact Monica direct if you'd like. Just a reminder, we have our underwriting seminar November 6th and 8th in person here in Dallas. Again, if you're interested, seats are limited, so feel free to email us at info.us@optimumre.com. And then also we're planning a full agenda for 2023 as far as webinars. Monica and her team are going to be hosting one in February on beneficiaries and another one in May on suicide. So look forward to announcements on that. And again, I encourage you to complete the survey at the conclusion of this webinar. That's how we're able to learn how to change the topics, how to add additional speakers. So feel free to add those comments as you complete the survey. Again, thank you for your time, and we'll conclude this webinar.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Enjoy your day.